Okay. Good morning, everybody. A couple things. I did not grade your OLAP and reporting functions Excel work yet. I kind of forgot about it, and then I saw there it needs grading, so I'm going to grade that probably earlier this week. Hopefully that went well. I think I was due last Wednesday or something like that. We're done with Chapter 9. We did a little ethical thing on Friday. We're kind of done with Chapter 9. And as we're done with that, I put up a quiz for Chapter 9. It's due next Monday, the 23rd at midnight. And it is 20 multiple choice. You can take it up to 3 times, and I'll keep the highest score. So it's basically, we didn't cover everything in that chapter, but we did cover a lot in that chapter. That was an important chapter, I felt. So we did cover a lot in that chapter. So we're going to move back. And we are going to talk today about Chapter 7. And Chapter 7, I think, has a lot of theory, but it does have some important components of it that I think is important for us to look at. Okay, so if we think about it, way back this first class, we talked about what is MIS, Management Information Systems, and what we can do with MIS in the business world. And I think we've talked about this a little bit. What we want to talk about is we want to talk about processes, because that's really what businesses do, right? They do process. Whatever the process is, maybe they transform raw material into finished product. Maybe they help you match people, Tinder-like app. Maybe they help you find music, but there's processes involved. And there's different types of processes. Processes, we talked about this before, can be very structured or can be very dynamic. Okay? Structured processes, really standardized, formalized, exceptions rare. For example, if it's kind of gift buying season, if you go to a store like Nordstrom's and you return a gift, there's a pretty structured process, right? They say, okay, here's the gift. If you have a receipt, the clerk does A, B, C. If you don't have a receipt, they do A, B, D. Okay, so there's a process, and it's pretty standardized. A dynamic process is one in which, there's not really a rule of thumb to do this. It's more like, okay, if I'm in Nordstrom's, what line of clothes am I going to stock in the spring? Are we going to, go with an online presence or just a retail presence? So we talk about processes. In the business world, there are standard and dynamic processes, and we talk about those. We also want to talk about not just if they're standard or structured or dynamic, but what is the scope of the process? Okay? Scope is how big, what does it cover, the scope of the process. And your textbook breaks that scope into 3 categories. The first one is work group, and we can think about this as departmental processes. Processes that happen in a department and a department only. The returns department would be a good example. You return something, that's a work group process. The payroll process, that's a work group process, right? Only the payroll department is concerned with that. Any kind of process that is isolated in a department is called a work group process. Scheduling an appointment at the dentist, that's a work group process. And because it's a work group process, we typically have what we call work group information systems, sometimes called functional information systems, that cover those processes. That they are, typically, if we think about these are like vertical type applications, right? Because maybe they're specifically for one department. Now, the other thing we might have is we have enterprise type processes. Enterprise type processes cover the entire enterprise, not the entire enterprise, but multiple work groups in an enterprise. For example, I think the book used an example of checking out of the hospital. Okay, unfortunately, if you have to check out of the hospital, you think about all the people that need to be involved in that. The medical staff obviously has to be involved. That's a department. The billing department has to know about it. Housekeeping has to know about it. Maybe the pharmacy has to know about it. Maybe the cafeteria has to know about it, right? So that process doesn't just span, one department, one work group. It spans multiple departments, multiple work groups. If you cancel your cable service, well, perhaps not just billing has to know about that, but also the technicians have to know that to shut off your cable. Maybe other departments in Comcast or Xfinity or whoever you have need to know about those things. Those are enterprise type processes. And we typically have enterprise information systems to deal with those. The other type of process is something called inter-enterprise. Okay? Inter-enterprise means there's two separate organizations involved. A lot of times we see this kind of stuff when we're talking about ordering from vendors, supply chain management. If I'm Ford or General Motors, I need to get steel, I need to get glass. So I have processes that don't just handle my organization, but multiple organizations. At St. Francis University, you think about it, we need to be in touch with the federal government for FAFSA data, right? For financial aid, for federal loans, all those kind of things. Those are inter-enterprise processes that go to two or more organizations. So I know it's a lot of kind of background theory work. Process can be structured or dynamic in a business. They can be geared toward, the scope can be one work group, an enterprise, or inter-enterprise. But what we really want to focus on, and what we've tried to focus on in this class, is how we can use information systems to improve processes. And if you think about it, if businesses are all about a bunch of processes, right? Any business, any organization you work for has structured, dynamic processes. Some are work group related, some are enterprise related, some are inter-enterprise related. We want to talk about how information systems can be used to improve. And when we talk about improving them, a couple things we want to discuss. Efficiency or effective. What's the difference between effective and efficient? We use those terms, and sometimes we use them synonymously, and they're really not synonyms. Effective versus efficient. What's effective versus efficient? What's the difference? What's the difference? Mark? Okay, what do you mean by a period of time? Okay. Consistent time, I like the time aspect. If you're efficiently doing something, kind of say you're doing it maybe quickly, right? The ratio of outputs to inputs is positive, right? You're doing a lot quickly. Yes, that's kind of being efficient doing something, right? I'm very efficient in this. I'm not spending a lot of effort to get these outputs, right? Which is good, right? And another way to say that is doing things the right way, right? Doing things the right way, doing them efficiently, doing things the right way. Okay, that's efficient. How about effective? What's the difference there? Okay, when you say good results, so you don't care about the process. Well, the process is important, but you're not really concerned about the ratio. When you say effective, you mean it does what it's supposed to do, right? It's doing the right thing, right? Not just doing things the right way. Effective is doing the right thing. I can be very efficient at something, but it doesn't matter. It's not effective, right? It's not effective. We could be doing something. I could be very efficient at teaching, but maybe not effective at teaching. Meaning you're not learning, right? Maybe I'm not a very efficient teacher. It takes us a long time to go through something, but no, you learn it, right? That's effective, right? So those are the differences there. Efficiency versus effectiveness, And we think about businesses, how do we classify something as effective? How do we classify something as effective when we think about a business? Go ahead.
Something that's worked the correct way numerous times.
Okay. So the correct way numerous times is right, effective. You're doing the right thing. And we really wanted to support, our organizational strategy, like what we're supposed to be doing, what we're, winning games is effective, right? That's an effective result of your team. Your goal is to win games. So that's your strategy, right? And maybe you practice efficiently and all those things. But the real result, the thing you're concerned with is how, the organization, does this support the organizational strategy? Now, information systems can help with this. Okay, they have helped with this. How can they help with this? Well, three things we can talk about. If we go back, and I'm going to go back, this is a business process. Okay, this is a business process that happens every damn day in retail organizations. Everyone that sells things, whatever it might be cars, might be products, might be perfume, might be jewelry, whatever. But this is a business process. The customer places an order. Okay, what are the process involved? Well, we have to check inventory. If it's not in inventory, we go back to the customer and say, hey, this thing is out of stock. If it is in inventory, then we say, hey, does this customer have the credit to buy this? If it's a car, we maybe go out and look at their credit history. If it's simply they've entered a credit card transaction, do they have a balance to do this, right? If they do, and it's in stock because it's this part in the process, then we go, all right, great, approved, go to the next step. If not, we go back to the customer and say credit rejected. If it's approved, then maybe there's special terms that the customer has put in for this order. And we want to see if that's good. Maybe it's a promotion code, or maybe it's maybe it's a closing cost kind of stipulation. If it's good, we approve the order and we fulfill the process. So fulfillment is fulfillment. I don't know if we talked about that. E-commerce terms is making the promise of the purchase. When I buy something off Amazon, fulfilling it, Amazon fulfillment is when they pick it, pack it, and ship it to me. They fulfill the transaction, right? When I buy a house, the fulfillment is when I get in the damn house. Fulfillment is when I buy a car, when I get in the damn car and drive away, right? So that's the fulfillment process. So that's a process, right? So we can make this process better, perhaps, by changing the structure. Okay, for example, if we look at this example, the first thing we do is check inventory. If it's in inventory, we say out of stock. If it's not, if it's out of inventory, we say out of stock. If not, we order. But when we get to this point, now we say, well, it's in inventory, but you can't afford it anyway, right? You don't have the credit. So maybe we switched it around. We say, let's check the customer credit first, and then if they don't have it, don't bother checking inventory, because that takes 3 people to go look in the back and see what's going on there. So imagine this is pretty much a manual effort at this point, right? So we can reverse the order of these tasks and say, all right, let's check the customer credit first. Look up to the ledger, is this person good? Then go check the inventory. So maybe that helps with some of our time, right? Maybe it makes us a little more efficient. We can also, with information systems, we can change resources. Okay, we can add resources. Or, if you guys remember when we talked earlier, when we talked about the 5-component framework, hardware, software, data, procedures, and people, we try to push things this way. That's changing resources. So how can I change resources in this process with information systems to make it better, to make it more efficient? What could I do? What could I do for credit check, for example? How have businesses made the credit check process more efficient? Has anyone ever gone for a car loan recently, or gone with their parents for a car loan? Bought a car? No one's bought a car, gone with their parents to buy a car? None of you? Alexis? How long did it take when you said, I want this car? How long does it take them to say, all right, you can have this damn car?
It goes back and forth for about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
What? Where are you buying a car?
My dad owns a body shop, so he goes back and forth with the dealer for a while.
When you mean negotiating price?
Yeah.
Okay, but let's say you negotiated a price. That's where I'm going to leave off. So you say, I'm going to pay X thousand for this. How long does that take then for you to drive out with a car? Not long at all, right? You guys ever done that? Ever buy a car? No? Gone to a dealer, bought a car? No?
I did it with my dad, but it was not money. So
Yeah.
I told him I wanted it.
Did you get a loan, Deshaun? No? Cash? Bag of cash you took? What are you driving?
Not now. This was my first car.
Oh, all right. What was it? Just tell me what it was.
It was a 07 Mitsubishi Accord.
Hey, that was my first car too. On an 07, it was like a 93. It was red. That spoiler was nice. Anyway, does it take them to approve your loan? You guys know that's literally 5 minutes. Literally 5 minutes. And they say, hey, you're approved, John Miko. You can drive out with this car. People pick up a car the same damn day, right? You buy it, you leave. Like you're buying eggs or groceries, right? You just buy the car and leave that day, yes?
I did it too, but my dad was like trying to get a loan for a motorcycle.
Yeah.
It took a while.
Really?
I guess for a credit company to get that.
All right. Where'd you buy from? Was it like a kind of like an up to date kind of place, or was it like was it a big dealership? Okay. I can tell you.
I mean, it was getting. I couldn't say it was getting late on a Saturday.
All right.
So that could be a reason why.
So it took you to what, the next Monday maybe to get there? All right. My car was demolished last year. I had to buy I was in an accident. I had to buy a new car, kind of in a hurry, and it was literally a 2-hour process, right, for me to buy that car. 2 hours. I said, I'll take that one. They did a credit check, went, right? And how did they do that? Well, the credit check process is no longer like you filling out all these forms, you saying this is what this is what I do for a living, this is how much I make, this is then saying, okay, we know your parents, we know you have a business, we know you're a good person. They just go right to the credit bureau, who has a number that says John Miko's credit rating is 820, and they say, that means the likelihood that he pays back this loan is very damn high. So within minutes, you're approved for $20,000, $30,000 loan, right? Just like that, okay? Because we've injected information systems in that, right? We've made that process more efficient, a lot more efficient, right? We put work that was on procedures and people, underwriters who would look at a situation, look at your employment history, look at your relationships, say, hey, you need a cosigner, and we said, hey, let's automate that work. Let's push it to the hardware and software, the computer side of things. That is changing resources. We can also change both. Let me go through a process that you guys just went through. I think it probably changed 3 or 4 years ago, so you may only know the new process. Does anyone ever not make their own schedule? Did anyone ever go to get a card from their advisor? This was only a few years ago. Okay, this is how students used to register for class. And this was only maybe 4 years ago. The same friends, we're kind of behind the times. This has happened a lot. Early on. But this is how the advising process went. If I was your advisor, you'd come into my office, and we would go through the schedule, and I'd say, you need these classes, and I would write on a card, I kid you not, a card, and I still have the cards in my office. This is the classes that you'll take, right? And then I would sign the bottom of the card. And I would also put on the back, these are alternative classes. If these classes are closed when you get there, you can take these classes. And I would sign that card. The student, we still had times when you could schedule, right? The student would take that card. They would physically go to Raymond Hall, and there was a room like this, and there was like 4 or 5 registrar people set up. And you would go and you'd say, this is my card, signed by my advisor. And they'd go to the system and they'd look it up, and they'd say, okay, here's your schedule. If it was closed, something else, they'd say, you got to go see your advisor and go back through that process, right? It was cumbersome, it was time-consuming, and it was 1970, right? So that's probably how we advise. So now, the process today. There's a couple things. The process still happens, right? You still end up in classes. You still meet with your advisor. How does that happen, though, now? What do I do as the advisor? It's much more of what kind of process? What's that? It's much more automated, but I still, St. Francis, one of the things that we say we're effective at is you guys get to meet with an advisor, right? You're not on your own. We say, hey, small class sizes, you get your own faculty advisor that advises you academically. So we still want that interaction to happen. We still want you to meet with your advisor. So what's the catch we put in that process so that you have to meet with me, which isn't the worst thing in the world? Yes?
Just sign off before you take our.
Yeah, we clear you, but I don't have to sign anything. I just say grant. Steve can schedule, right? I grant him access, yes? And that's all, yes? And then we said, you know what? It's not really a hard process to find a class and say, I want in there. So we made that a self-service work system. Yes? So you say, I want this class, here's the options, like a menu, and you select that right online. A much better process. And I can tell you, it used to take me, I kid you not, it was awful. I have like 40 advisees. It used to take me probably 2 or 3 times as long as it does now. Right? Because I can go in and kind of say, I can put more on you and the system. Right? I can say, hey, you make your own schedule. Here's the classes you need. You go figure it out. You do it yourself. I don't have to make the card. Yes? That was a pain in the butt. How can we make that system better? How can we make that scheduling system better than it is today? Using information systems. How can we make it better? Come on, you guys should. There's still a big disconnect when you meet with your advisor. What is that? And information systems can do this. Ours can't yet. It should be able to, but it can't. Yes.
You still have to go through the paradigm and see what classes.
That's a pain in the butt, isn't it? You have to say, hey, my name is JJ, and I took, 70 credits. I'd like to know the 28, the 58 credits that I still need, right? Geez, that is a structured process. Here's the courses you need to be an accounting major at St. Francis. Here's the courses you've taken. Here's the ones that aren't taken. So here, to make that process, more efficient, less time, and more effective in that you're taking the classes you're supposed to take, so you don't get misadvised, because that happens all the time. And then you come and see me and say, Dr. Miko, I took this class, not this class, and I have to sign some waiver form, do more exception process. Wouldn't it be nice if you just brought up a screen that said, hey, here are the classes you've taken, here are the classes you haven't taken, and by the way, of the classes you haven't taken, here are the offerings for the ones that are offered in the spring, right? So you need Speech 103, maybe it's highlighted in blue, and here are the 5 offerings of Speech 103. Do you want to take it now? Check it, right? If not, maybe next semester, yes? So that is the way it should work, shouldn't it? And think about it. Now your time isn't so much going, that disconnect. Information system, ours can't, but it should be able to do that, yes? That makes the process better. Makes it more efficient, more faster, and also more effective. Think about some other process we have on this campus. Withdrawing, right, from a class. Okay, that is still the same process that we've used probably, obviously since I was a student, probably for 50 years, right? Those forms, you ever see some of those forms the registrar's office had? They actually look like they were typed. Like they don't look like a word processor did. It actually looks like it's typewriter font. You ever see those up there? I'll tell you the form that you ought to get to see that naturally. Get there's a form for taking a class pass-fail. It looks like it should be in a museum. It really, did anyone ever see that? I should have brought that damn thing in. I'll bring it in next class. It looks like something like Maurice Stokes filled this out. I guarantee it. Guaranteed. Okay? But we still use that damn form. So think about withdrawing from a class. And I don't mean after before the dropout date, I mean after the dropout date. How does that work? How does that process work? You withdrawn from a class?
Your advisor has to sign it, the teacher has to sign it, and if you're an athlete, the athletic department has to sign it.
Yeah, and the other thing you may not know, if you are a OASIS student at OASIS, then the CAS department has to sign it. So all those conditions have to be met. So, and how does that, not just sign it, but we're all not one place, are we? Your advisor is in SCOTUS, Mr. Krimmel is in Stokes, right? Maybe the professor is in Science Hall, Cass is over in Francis Hall. So think about that sneaker net that has to happen. And it's for a good reason. Maybe they want to talk to you, right, and say, well, why are you dropping this class? But and then you have to, finally it ends up the registrar's office. And furthermore, it just doesn't happen. The registrar has to go into the system and then look at the form and say, drop this class, right? Change a major. Think about change a major form. How many people have changed their major and it didn't happen in the system? It happens all the damn time, right? So it's infuriating me. But people change their major, they come back and see me, and we did the form, and it doesn't happen in the system. Why? Because the form somehow doesn't get put into the system. The system should start the process, right? You should say, here's the thing I want to do in the system, and then once all the checks are received, it should just happen, right? That is doing it much more efficiently. That's how information systems can be used to decrease time. Now, there's a process known as business process reengineering. Okay? Business process, it's kind of an old term. Business process reengineering came from a gentleman named Michael Hammer, and this goes way back when information systems like just started coming into usage. He said, let's look at business processes, and let's just not automate them. Let's obliterate them, right? Let's take all these unnecessary steps that maybe add no value and get rid of them, right? So not only are we going to automate this thing, but we're going to get rid of steps that have no value, that add no value. That's what the term business process reengineering is. So if you think about it, you're going to be in charge of organizations, and there's going to be processes, departments that said we do it this way. And the most important question you can ask is, well, why do we do it that way? Is there a better way? The worst thing you can say is, because that's the way we've always done it. And that happens too often in organizations, because that's the way we've always done it. That is not a good reason, because the world is a lot different than it was in 1950, right? 1970, whenever these things need to be obliterated. These processes need to be changed. So how do we do it? Okay, how do we do it? Well, if we talk generally, okay, about making these tasks better, we want to, when IS can perform an activity, for example, instead of someone manually entering the change of major on the system, they can actually do it. The system can do it. They can just say, hey, it's done. It can augment an activity. What do you think we mean by augment an activity? Augment an activity is maybe the person is still doing the activity, but now they have an information system to help them do it better. For example, maybe I call and I want to reserve a room, or maybe I want to make a dental appointment. Well, that person probably has an information system. When I'm talking to that appointment secretary, he or she has a system that says, hey, here are the available dates, right? They have an information system to make them better. When we call a help desk, we're still talking to a person, but they have some kind of system that allows them to help me, right? They have a script. They can look into it and say, hey, we've had this problem before. These are the things we want to do. So information systems can perform an activity, obviously, activities that were done by humans, they can perform. It can augment an activity. And the other thing that it can do, which a lot of people don't think about this, but it can control the flow of data in the approval process, right? It can take away, think about that withdrawal slip. That stuff all happens sequentially, doesn't it? You go see the teacher, you go see the advisor, you go see Mr. Krimmel, you go see Cass, then you go to the registrar's office. It's a sequential process. Here, 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 here. It doesn't have to be. It can be done in parallel, meaning, I could be reviewing that request the same time as Mr. Krimmel, the same time as your teacher, your advisor. It can just say, hey, Sarah Ross would like to do this. All four of us get an email, and we all can check off on it instantaneously, right, at the same time. It doesn't have to be, okay, I got Dr. Miko's approval, now I got this person's approval. So it can control the data quality and the flow. That's what information systems can do a lot better than humans, okay, at the same time. So what I wanted to get from those things, okay, so we're kind of, should have went over here, and that's kind of over here too, but businesses are made of processes, right? Every business has processes it has to perform. Those processes can be work group, enterprise, or inter-enterprise kind of processes. And we want to use information systems to make them more effective and more efficient. Effective is doing the right thing. Efficient is doing things the right way, right? So both things can help. And how do we do that? We can change structure, change resources, or both, because ISs can perform an activity, augment an activity, and also can help control data quality and flow. So I want to talk about a problem. So we're still focusing on the organization. And one of the problems that happens in organizations quite frequently is something called information silos. Let's first talk about what is a silo. What is a silo? What is a silo? You even think about an agricultural example. What's a silo? Wow, I learned.
It's very stores.
Central PA. Yeah. So what do they look like? Big tubes, basically,
Yeah.
right? You know, and you guys know what I'm talking about. You ride around the farms, around this local area, you see, you know, the farms have these giant cylinders, right? They store like wheat and grain in them. So when we talk about information silos, okay, what happens in organizations? Okay, let's think about how information systems got developed in organizations. So we always have these processes. Think about 1847, people scheduled classes at St. Francis Academy at that point. They dropped classes. Maybe there were like 3 classes and they were all biblical related, but people scheduled classes. Those processes existed, right? So there was also a billing department. There was also a cafeteria department. There was also a housing department. I don't know what they looked like, but they were all friars, I'm sure. But those departments existed. So maybe someone in the billing department at some point said, you know what? We have these processes and they're a pain in the butt. We have all these people, all this manpower needed. I want to automate them, right? So how do they automate those processes? What do they do? Now I'm talking like 60s, 70s, 80s. How do they automate these processes? These processes happened since 1847. How do they automate? What did they do? They built or bought what? An information system, right? So we bought a billing information system. Hey, we're going to have this system that's going to take care of billing. It's going to, mail invoices. When someone pays me, I'm going to mark it paid, right? It's going to track all that stuff, right? So they built a billing information system. Then maybe a few years later, maybe the marketing department said, you know what? We do all kinds of things where we send out letters. We take care of, requests. We send out information. So we want a marketing information system. Okay, and then maybe the registrar said, hey, I want an information system. So to keep track of classes, whatever it might be. So they built an information system. So what's the problem with that? And that's the St. Francis example, but think about any business has a marketing information system, a manufacturing information system, a finance information system. What's the problem with that? Steve?
There's no overlap.
What do you mean by overlap? You're right. I just want you.
Like between billing and marketing, or like billing and registration. Like you have someone that registers and they know, okay, you register on this date, you need to bill them. Maybe they don't know that they need to bill.
Okay. So if you think about it, and this is just the way things evolve, right? When he said there's no overlap, what he means is these are information silos. They don't talk to one another, right? Have you ever been on the phone with someone, or even face to face, and you've had to give them your address information like twice or 3 times? You ever have that situation? Well, you know what the situation is they have multiple systems, right? And they say, all right, now you're in billing, so we need, what's your name and address here? And now we're in, I don't know, manufacturing, so what's your name and address for this? So what has happened is just organically, we've built these things called information silos, where they all have their departments, but they're distinct entities with no overlap. We call those data isolated islands of automation, right? So we're doing something here for these processes, we're doing something here for these processes, and these departments have different goals, different personnel and work group needs. So, but what happens is if you think about it, now we have John Miko's address stored here, John Miko's address stored here. John Miko's address stored here. My address changes. Maybe I tell the billing department about it. Well, billing department doesn't care, about marketing. They don't care about the registrar, so they probably don't communicate with them, right? So now, worse, I have an address right in one place, wrong in two places, and no one knows which one's right. Okay? So maybe all three do know. Maybe I make that change. Maybe I'm conscientious and I tell all three departments about it. But now we have to make that change three separate places. This is the problem of information silos. There's data integrity issues. You think about those work processes. This supports one work process good. This supports one work group process good. This does as well. But anything that spans the enterprise, not so good, right? Anything that spans the enterprise, not so good. So what do you think the solution is to this? What do you think the solution is to this? And that, just thinking, what would you do? Yes.
Especially with like the application process and like admission into school, if you have like one information system that you have like a profile of the person,
Okay.
and then each department had access to the profile. Because like I know like when I came in, I had to fill out the same form, like name, address, intended major, like at least 4 times.
At least.
Through the athletic department and like the different parts of the school.
Okay. So you're saying instead of having that one place, have like a central, right, repository.
Like your person profiles, and then like each person can add to that one profile.
So what you're describing is we're going to say, you know what? We don't need an information system for every department. Sometimes we might have that, but the solution to this that most organizations have gone for is something called enterprise systems. Okay? Not work group systems like departmental systems, but an enterprise system. And an enterprise system, if we had an enterprise system at St. Francis University, and we kind of do and we kind of don't, right? It kind of is an enterprise system for certain functions like marketing, like registrar, like billing, I think like advancement, like when alumni office stuff. I think it's integrated for that. It's an enterprise system, but I don't think it integrates at all with athletics, right? And that's a big component. So what an enterprise system is say, we're not going to have customer information on Sarah 7 different places. We just have one person, one student, Sarah Ross, right? We have it one place. And then maybe athletics needs different information, but that would be separate. That would be a different module in this information system. So one of the examples of this, okay, one of the big examples of this is something called a customer relationship management system. And if you're in marketing, you should know this term. Because you're going to probably, in your first interview, they're going to mention CRM. Okay? CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management System. It is an enterprise system, meaning it covers multiple departments. Okay? It's a suite of applications, a database, what Sarah called like a central repository, right? That's a database and a set of inherent processes. So if we think about a customer, every customer in an organization goes through something called a customer life cycle, right? You weren't, at one point, you weren't a customer. You weren't enrolled in St. Francis University. You were what we would call, a lead. You were a target. You were a prospect. So if you think about it, admissions, and this is a St. Francis example, admissions goes out, they buy names, they send you email addresses. They already have some, they know your name, they know your email address, maybe they send you letters, they know your address, right? So they have all that information right at the beginning, right? As you're a lead, you're a prospect. So at that point, we say, hey, let's build a customer record. She's not really a customer yet, or not a student yet, but let's build a record for her at this point in the process, right? When you're just a lead. Only maybe 5% of them pan out. But the 5% of them pan out, maybe they make a sell, right? Or they enroll at St. Francis. That's a sell. We already have that information. Yes, we have that information. Now we add to it. They bought A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Now, maybe a couple years later or a couple months later, they have a problem. So they call our support desk, right? Our help desk. Or maybe they have some kind of issue, well, we have one customer record that follows this person all through the customer life cycle. And then sometimes we lose them and we want to win them back, and we go through this process again. So what organizations have done is they have built bigger information systems that comprise not just work group systems, but entire enterprise information systems. This has helped us do a lot of things. We don't have those data integrity issues. And guess what else? The process has become more efficient because we don't have to enter information 5 or 6 times. And guess what else? They become more effective because now we know, hey, maybe this was where we got Sarah from in the first place. Maybe it was an email solicitation, or maybe our coach recruited her. And now we can measure those kind of things that we couldn't before because we didn't have access when we were in advanced. We didn't have access to that type of data. Now we have access to all these things. And if you think to chapter 9, remember, information, data, leads to what we can do analysis on it, and then we have information that we can plug into any of these processes. So organizations have moved systematically from these workgroup information systems to enterprise information systems. And the biggest one is called CERM. Okay, well, I'm sorry, the most common one is called CERM. It is not process specific, it is customer centric. So the customer is the heart of the system. Suite of applications, a database, instead of inherent process. Inherent process means processes that happen they're just inherent in the way we treat a customer. Manages all interactions with customers through the 4 phases of the customer life cycle: marketing, telling about our product, customer acquisition, relationship management, loss and churn. Intended to support customer-centric organization. So if you work for a company and you're in the marketing department, they are going to utilize an enterprise information system called CERM. There are others, okay? This is the most important one. There are others. There are ones that are huge information systems called ERPs. And they're called Enterprise Resource Planning Systems. These are giant. If anyone has ever heard the company, called SAP, SAP? Okay. PeopleSoft. Anyone ever heard of PeopleSoft? These are 2 gargantuan companies in the ERP business. So what they do is they come in and say, we are going to put in an information system in your organization that has a module for inventory, that has a module for manufacturing, module for accounting, customer support, relationship management, sales, solicitation, and human resources. So we have one ERP database, as Sarah kind of said, one customer profile, one ERP database, one source of data that all of these systems or these modules of this ERP utilize. Now the problem with ERPs are they're huge, they're massive, and when they're huge and massive, what happens? When things are bigger, tend to be more complicated, more difficult to install. One of the advantages of this, though, is we don't have that overlap, right? We don't have the lack of overlap, if you will. And when we buy an ERP, we don't just get the system, but it also has processes embedded in it, like best practice processes. It says this is how we interact with these things, so you're going to follow this process. Okay, a very, very beneficial thing. Okay, there's a lot in this chapter. We'll probably actually that I'm not covering is what I want to say. I kind of want to get the gist of this chapter and some of the terms in it, like CERM and ERP, so you understand that, information silos. But we're probably going to finish it on Wednesday and be done with it. And we're going to move on to Chapter 8 on Wednesday. Chapter 8, and we won't have a quiz on Chapter 7 because we didn't cover a whole lot of it. Chapter 8 is on social media, so something that continues to grow, something you're very familiar with it. And we're going to talk about how organizations and businesses use social media, not to just the market, but for customer relationship management, and also to do marketing research. So that'll be Wednesday. So please, if you didn't get a chance to take advantage of Pop-Tarts or Craisins, please take some on your way out. And I'll see you Wednesday.